Hello everyone. I've been going through some of my older videos lately, just trying to see if anything has changed since we've been going through the versions of ORD here. And I think one of the biggest things is the videos I've done on sheets. So I wanted to start here today with the cross-section sheets. The video I did previously is pretty good if you're creating a sheet from scratch, essentially. That has a pretty good demonstration of how to do that. But I wanted to kind of simplify that and show a few of the things that have been changed, some settings added since we've gone up to the latest version of ORD here. So I'm currently in FDOT Connect version 10.10.01, which is the latest as of June 2022, and that's ORD version 10.10.21.04. So there's a few things they've added in here that make it a little easier. And so I've got my note up here about project-specific sheet seeds. So this just kind of goes through some of the things that we need to do in order to get a sheet seed. So I say project specific because you might want a specific sheet seed for each project, like you want to add your engineering of record for that particular project, or maybe you're not working on an FDOT project, you're working on a project for a county, and instead of having all the FDOT information in the sheet border, you have information for the county. So this allows you to set up the sheet seed that you're going to use for all of your sheets. So the first thing we need to do is go here, and this link's not going to work because we're in 10.10, but I'm pretty close to there. So if I go to my 10.10 organization civil, FDOT, DGN Lib, sheet seeds, I want to go ahead and grab this 11 by 17 cross-section name boundary. And then over here, I've got my sample project that I'm working on. And I'm going to go to my symbology folder. And this folder name, as you can see by the note here, has changed over the versions here. So I need to create a DGN Lib folder. And then I'm going to take this cross-section name boundary, put that in here. I'm just copying that from the standard FDOT setup. So we'll just call it XS sample. And now that we've got that there, we can go ahead and open this DGN Lib. So go ahead and open, navigate to my symbology folder, DGN Lib. And you won't see it at first. You have to go ahead and change what you're searching for to search for DGN Libs. And it's going to ask you if you want to set the work set, which you can, because this is a project specific DGN Lib, so we'll set the work set. Now that we're in here, we can see that we're in the sheet model of this sheet seed. So we can go ahead and go up. Let's go look at the multi-model views. So this is similar to what I did in my previous video where we had the start seed, we had our alignment, and then we created this name boundary and got that all set up. So that's already done for us when we use these sheet seeds. So if we go to the drawing model, see we have our cross-section name boundary sitting here, and we have our sheet view. So in order to make this our own, essentially, we have to change a few things. So you can see that the models have their names here. Let's pull this out so we can see the sheet number. And I'm just going to, first off, clear out this sheet number because I haven't been putting sheet numbers down there. I've been using Bluebeam or Adobe to number them after the fact, just because sheet index is not that reliable. Anyway, we want to change a few of these names of these models. So I want to call this, let's see, we called it XS sample here. So let's call this 11 by 17 XS sample. So that we're renaming the sheet model name, and we're going to rename the drawing model here XS sample. Now those two don't really do anything. I mean, you can leave those. The one thing that you need to make sure that you change is coming in here. We need to go to the saved views. Let's see, drawing production, saved views. So we bring that over here. This saved view is the thing that will eventually show up in your dropdown when you go to create your name boundary. So this is the thing that you have to change. Otherwise, you'll see two 11 by 17 cross sections. Once we get done with this, you'll see it twice in the list, but you won't know which one is your actual custom one or the stock one. So we'll just call this again XS sample. We've got that set up. Now what I want to do is, next bit here is go into this actually cross-section drawing model here, and I want to look at how it's referenced. So if I double click on this, I can see we're using a nesting depth of 99. I've had some issues using 99 in the past. Sometimes it seems to kind of go in circles a little bit and you get stuff that you don't necessarily want in there. And so what I'm going to do for the drawing model is set this to 2. And this can kind of be dependent on how you are setting up your actual cross sections, your cross section sheet file. So personally, I create a model motif file that you've probably seen in previous videos, where I reference all of my models in, get everything all set up, all the levels, correct levels on, correct models in there. And then I reference that into my cross-section DGN, cross-section sheet DGN, and live nest it. So in order for this to work, I need to have the nesting depth of at least 2. You can go higher than that, but you need it at least 2 for this to work. And then of course I always go never, because I want it to use the settings from that motif file. And new in 10.10 here is this settings from design model. So that's essentially what never was always doing, but I think it makes it stick a little better. So you can see DOT already had that set up, which is good. So really we just changed this nesting depth to 2, and I just always put this to never still. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. And then we want to go into the sheet. And this one needs to be 3 because we're, again, going another layer deeper, because this is, we have the motif attached to the cross-section file, the cross-section file attached to the drawing model, and then the drawing model attached to the sheet model. So we've got three deep we have to go there. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. Okay, so now we have that ready. All of our references are set up. Our saved view is changed. So now we can start getting this set up. So we've got our sheet in here already, which is good. I have a custom or a project specific cell library I've put in here. So we can go to our cells, and I've got this project specific cell library I set up. So I've got an EOR cell I created, and I just, the origin point's here, so I can snap that here. So by putting this EOR cell here, every cross-section sheet I create will automatically have that sitting there. And you can see that we don't have our electronic delivery note. And this is a little bit different from the previous video where we had the pick list and all that stuff. This, I think they've kind of done away with that and just gone back to this basic, putting some cells in here. So I've got this cell set up where I just snap it to the bottom here. There's my note. So I've got my electronic delivery note, my EOR cell, I've got my sheet, and I make sure it's got this stamp over here that will put the time, date, user, and file name all in there. The last thing we need to do before we exit the file is to go ahead and take a look at our configuration variables. So there's already an existing configuration variable, msdgnliblist, that is already configured by FDOT Connect to look at that folder that we created. So this uStation workset standards here is essentially your workset path to the standards/symbology folder. So it, like I said, it changes depending on which version of FDOT Connect you're using. So this little guide is basically what they were doing. So right now I'm on symbology, so it'll take me to this dgnlib folder in my symbology folder and looks for star.dgnlib, so anything that has a .dgnlib file extension. So that's the first one. We can go ahead and look at settings, configuration variables, and if I do dgnlib, search dgnlib, I can go to my msdgnliblist, and you can see that, let's see, so we're here. So there's the path, and that value is up here in this grouping. So the next part that isn't configured is this msdgnliblist drawing seeds. So I essentially want to copy this value from the msdgnliblist variable and come down and paste it into this drawing seeds one, as I've already done. So you can see I've already got that variable right there pasted, and it expands out to this. So the good thing about using this variable is whichever workset you open and start working in, this variable will change essentially. Instead of putting a static file path in here, this variable will change to the current workset that you're working on. So once you have both of those drawing seeds, or I'm sorry, once those configuration variables set up, your drawing seeds should begin working. So what we need to do now is go ahead and hit OK, and it'll probably ask you to save. Now mine has already been done, so it's not asking me to save, but it'll ask you to save that to your, I believe, personal.ucf. So go ahead and do that, and once you've done that, you can go ahead and exit out of MicroStation, or exit out of ORD, because we need to reopen ORD for those configuration variables to load up. All right, now I'm in my model RD99 motif file. This step is pretty similar to what I did before, where I'm going to add all of my model files to this file and get everything set up the way that I want it to be. So I want to grab, I've got this is kind of a new file. This is just, I have a existing ground so that I can annotate the existing ground elevation at the center line. We've got our existing features. Let's grab 87 here too. Let's grab the utils. Just grab wetland. So all of these things are like utilities, wetlands, those are things that'll get annotated. And then we can start grabbing all of our all of our model files here. And let's grab that subsoil too. So I'm going to add these. You can hit add here because I need to go to a different folder. Grab my survey, grab this GDTM, add that, hit open. That's fine. It's going to say this for all of these because I pulled these from a different project. So they're not actually attributed to this work set currently. Then we'll just go ahead and hit OK through all of the attachments. Okay, and we can zoom extents. So now we can see all the things I've attached. Go ahead and hit the terrain model here and set it as the active terrain model so that I can hit F2 here and bring up my views. And I just want to make my 3D a little bit bigger. And you can see FDOT was kind of nice, and they made this background a little more gray. So that makes me happy. Okay, so we've got all of our stuff added, but like I said before, you can see that we have a bunch of stuff here. It looks like I accidentally added a pavement projected there. So I accidentally added that DGN, that pavement projected. If I want to get rid of it in both the 2D and 3D, you want to go ahead and delete it in the 2D, and it should go away in the 3D as well. So I just want to start cleaning up this file a little bit. And we'll start with this default view over here. And like I did in the previous video, I always go to global display because sometimes I don't know which view this is actually going to end up in, or this is going to end up in when I start attaching. So if I use global display, then I make sure I'm kind of covering all my bases. So I'll start with the ALGN file. We'll just turn off some of these ticks and all the stuff I really don't need. This isn't majorly important to the cross sections themselves because that's not going to be reading the 2D, but it's more just so it's easier for you to see what's going on. So really the big ones are just the template levels, all these corridor points, these things, construction lines. Just trying to get it a little more cleaned up so we can always, I pretty much always turn default off because nothing good should ever be on default anyway. So that's pretty good. Subsoil, let's just turn off all this stuff. Don't really need anything else on there. And then GDTM. That's fine. So the big one is really coming over here into the default 3D, and again, in global display. And going ahead and grabbing all these. So I really want to just turn off anything that's not a PX, EX. So like these EPs, those we don't want to show up. PMs are good. Those are just your template points. EX, EP. I just kind of go down the list, make sure I turn off, I always turn off default as well. Anything that doesn't have a EX, PX is what I'm looking for. EP, 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 EP. So also these top meshes and bottom meshes I want off. Those are things that I'm going to use later when I put together my final surfaces. So there's just a lot of stuff I end up turning off, and this really helps clean up my cross-section files. Construction lines, obviously, we can turn off. But you get the idea. That's basically what we want to do. I turn everything off in here except for the DTM EX. The alignments, we can turn construction lines off. But that's the idea. We're trying to get this as cleaned up as we can so that when it's presented in the cross sections, we see only what we want to see. So now that we got that file ready, we can go ahead and create our cross-section file and start attaching this file to that cross-section file next. All right, now we're here in this RDXS RD01 file that I just created, and I'm going to start by attaching my Model 99 motif. And I want to make sure I turn live nesting on and just turn the depth to 1. And we're going to make sure we're on never so that it keeps all of the settings that we previously set up in that Model 99. So it might take a second to load here. Okay, now we've got everything attached here. And we need to set the terrain model as the active terrain model. Okay, that creates our default 3D model. And we can hit F2. And we can see everything in here is just as we had it in the Model 99 file. So now we want to start cutting some cross sections. So we want to go to Drawing Production, and we want to create some name boundaries. After 30 seconds or so there, we've got our Place Name Boundary tool open, and we want to make sure that we are on Civil Cross Section. And here's where we should be able to see our drawing seed that we created, 11x17 XS sample. As long as you followed all the previous instructions, you should have this in your dropdown. And we're showing 20 scale, which is correct. And let's go ahead and, so it's asking us down here, let's expand this out so you can see this. Before we do anything else, I like to identify the path element, because you can see once I do that, it's going to give this new group a name, which is fine. But if you put a name in here before you select the path element, then it's going to overwrite it with this. So that's why I just do the path element first. So we'll just call this sample XS. And now you can see I'm on that line moving around here. So I'm going to start at 151 plus 20, just because the project begins at 151, so I don't want to be right up there. So at the bottom, you can see it's accept or reject the path start point, so I can accept. And once I've accepted it, you can see we're coming out here. And let's see, 50 should be fine. Let's end at 155. Okay. Now you can see it's showing me all of the cross sections that it's going to create. And I can accept the end. So before I accept again, to place everything, we want to look at the rest of these settings. So because I used that 11x17 dgen lib to start with, we've got all our offsets already set up. So we've got a left and right offset, so that should fit on the sheet. And our interval is 50, so that's where we're getting each of these ticks. So you can see it started at 150, 120, but then it's putting another one at 50 and then at all the even stations. So that's what it does. It doesn't go 50 feet from 150, 120 and keep going. It creates intervals like on top of, from the 152, 153, and then so it'll stay on that interval. Vertical exaggeration, that's 2, that's correct. That's standard for our cross sections. Top and bottom clearance, you may want to adjust that depending on if you have borings or really deep utilities or anything like that. So these can always be adjusted. You can also manually adjust them after you place them, but that can potentially cause issues. You have to do some tweaking with your drawing model, and then you also have the issue of, okay, I made my view of this cross section bigger. Does it still fit on the sheet with all the other sections that are on the sheet? So that's something you have to think about. So right now we'll just leave that as standard, and the datum spacing is just 2. So like that just is like the vertical scale essentially. We don't have an event point list. You can create event point lists. Those must be created in the alignment file where your alignment is. And you could create that, you could create it so that it's almost like setting up pattern lines, essentially, like we used to do in GeoPack. So you could say exactly where you want all of your cross sections to go. So maybe you want to make sure that you have cross sections at all your driveways or at particular points on your intersection or wherever it is. You could go set up event points, but it must be done in your alignment file. So I want to uncheck create drawing like I did before, just so we can go through all the steps. And we'll click to accept this. And it's placing all of our drawing boundaries in here. So like I said before, if you ever wanted to adjust a boundary, you can always come in here and manipulate this and drag, just make sure that you're dragging it straight down in the Z direction. You can see, well, it's not even the Z in this, but in this Y is changing right here. So typically you'd want to drag that down in increments of 2 to match your exaggeration. You can see that we have all of our slices going through everything here. So if I open up my name boundary tool, open on the other screen, we can look at the cross-section groups. I gave it the group name. We've got all of our stations in here. So I want to show the create drawing dialog. So once I click that, that'll stay highlighted. And then there's all these buttons up here that are grayed out right now because I haven't selected a group. So once I select a group, this cross-section group, the ones that I can actually, this is a cross-section drawing group, so I can't do any of the other ones. So I have to create this one. And since I've selected that whole group, it's going to grab all of the sections in this group. Now you could potentially do just one section in the group if you wanted to do that. So this, I believe this view is a little bit different too. It gives you a few more options as far as naming scheme. So the standard thing that it does is it goes group space dash space station. I don't really need it to do that. I just want it to say the station. So that's the view name. So it's setting up a view, a saved view, a drawing model, and a sheet model. So we just want to make sure that it's using the XS Annotation. So DOT has set up their own cross-section annotation for these within this file to run. So when we run this, it'll run the DOT XS Annotation, and I actually haven't run the 10.10 annotation yet, but I did notice that there is a new annotation for utilities in there, so I'm interested to see if it annotates our utilities. So we want to make sure we're at 20 scale there. Full size is correct here, but you want to make sure your detail scale is 20 to match, it's by the name boundary. So as long as you set up everything correctly, you should be good to go. Obviously there's add to sheet index in here. I think everyone knows how I feel about sheet index, so I don't even bother doing anything with that. I pretty much pretend it doesn't exist. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. And now we're back in our last sheet or cross-section sheet here. And yes, it looks like we are annotating utilities now, so that's exciting. The only issue is we're not annotating the size of this particular utility, so that might be something I need to look at for the future, is to see if we can pull the property of the size of this utility. But this is cool. I like that we're able to automatically annotate that now, because that was something I used to have to go into and manually add every time. So you can see, we've got our sheet seed came in. We've got my name there. We've got our engineering of record. We've got our scale here. All the annotation is here. Yeah, everything is here. So we can go ahead and see that we have all of our various views in here. So obviously, like everything else that's automatically annotated, we're probably going to need to do some cleanup here, just because we have utilities that are sitting on top of each other. There's not a whole lot you can do for that. Another issue here is the way DOT is doing some of their annotation. You might get some weird stuff like this. So I can go into some detail about what I do with annotation further along in this video here, but I just want to kind of take a look at what else we have going in our cross sections here. So we can go to our first sheet here. Where's our first sheet? 150, 120. So we only got 2 sections in here, just because we've got a big pond / lake out here, so that this cross section is a little big. But yeah, there's some stuff, like I mentioned that I had set up something to annotate the existing ground here. That's a custom annotation that I made. Okay, so now that we've seen how our cross sections are made and everything's getting annotated with the standard annotation, next thing we can do is go look at some of the modifications that we can make to that annotation. All right, so we're back here in our multi-model views now. One thing I wanted to show before we start looking at annotation is one of the new tools that's pretty cool. And I'm going to make some room for it here. Just put it on 8. Is the cross-section navigator, which is pretty handy. So I will tell you, make sure that if you have your properties window open over here, or docked, or it's open anywhere, close it, because it can cause problems, make things run extra slow. And if you feel like you're still running a little slow, you can go ahead and try and close Explorer. But I think the properties one is the one that really triggers it. So cross-section navigator, and it's asking us to locate alignment. So we just click the alignment, select our open view, and we get something like this. Now, when I was doing this video for the first time, my view here opened up and it looked a little weird. What I noticed was I went to my view attributes here, and if I turn this off, this is what I got when I first opened it up. So for some reason, this view 8 did not have clip volume turned on, which basically means like I'm seeing the entire model in this view just sliced right through here. So we need to make sure that we have clip volume turned on so that we see our normal looking cross section. So this navigator is pretty nice. We can just flip through our cross sections, and what it's doing is just flipping through the individual models that we created. So it'll go all the way to the end. Yeah, so that works pretty great. So to start with our annotation, we need to make sure that we're sitting in this default model, and I want to open up my Explorer. I'm going to pin that here, and we want to be in Openroads standards. Open up all these. So I'm going to open up the groups and definitions for cross section. Oh, that one's going to take a minute. So starting with the definitions, these are all of the definitions that have been delivered with the FDOT Connect. So they have this group that has all of these definitions loaded in it. All of these definitions do basically what they're saying they're going to do. So it looks like I mentioned that they're putting a point elevation at the center line. So it may be that they are doing it in a way that I was in a different way than I do it with mine. So you can see we've got a ton of things for utilities, existing and proposed utilities in here, which are brand new. If we want to go check those out and see what they look like, we need to right click on the cross-section XS Annotation group here and click Manage. And unfortunately, there's still a display bug with dark mode in 10.10. So we've got PGL annotation right away. This grid is just, it's doing all the lines and all that stuff. So you can kind of scroll through here and see what each thing is doing. It's kind of a good exercise to go in here and start testing things out, especially when you just pick a section and start playing around with some of the annotations and figure out what does what. One thing I noticed is like a lot of the lengths, tick lengths and spacing and offsets are very, very small. So like very small adjustments to those makes a big difference. Slope annotation. So this is what I was getting at before, and sometimes I don't particularly like the way it does this. So with the slope, they've got not 0.1 minus 0.2 equals 0. So they basically don't want to label any flat slopes. So if elevation of 0.1 equals 0.2, elevation of 0.2, then they don't want that to label. They're only labeling things that are on top, and the length of the line has to be greater than 2.75 feet. So if you got a short segment, it won't annotate. And this point offset thing here basically is limiting the slope annotation to the left-hand side, because this is for the left. What I like to do is go in here. So they're using all segments. And this might make a little bit of work, but if you have your templates set up, you can create a list of segments and go grab segments from a template. And we'll go in and grab, this is looking at that. Okay. So I can come into my templates. Let's just go look at like pavement, for example. And we'll do left, pavement typical one left. So if I click on this, open up this template, you can choose the list of segments that you want, and you can build your segments up so that you don't get something that looks where I have like, we saw before, it was labeling slopes along that barrier wall for some reason. But what I can do is you can pick the segment from down here. Let's just say if I wanted to label from here to here, I could put those 2 points into here and hit add, and it would load over here. Or you can just come in here and click sometimes. So right now it's not letting me click, and I don't know why. Most of the time you can click the segment and it will add it, but not this time apparently. So if I look for left PGL in, so that I know based on my template that that's left PGL in, and this is left travel out friction course. And then if I find left travel, so let's add that, it highlights. So this will highlight if you click on it as well, if it allows you to click on it. And we want to find left travel out friction course. Left travel out friction course to left pavement ELP out friction course. So now I've got those two. And you can go through all of your templates and add and create this list of things that you want to slope annotate. So if I hit close, I would need to hit apply expression changes for that to go through. Now I'm not going to do that because I want to keep this stock annotation the way it is. But that's how you would go about adding those left slope annotations. And then you'd come over here. Yes, it's telling me I have not applied the expression. And then I'd come over here and do my rights. And I found that if you want to do it that way by selecting your components, you don't really need to separate out the left and the right. You can just do one slope annotation. And the good thing is, if you set up your templates the same way for every project, and then you come in here and manage your annotations and set it up like that, you can basically use the same annotations every time, which I'll show you how to do in a second here after we flick through a few more of these. So we've got, you can go through and look at how they're doing the right of way. This is a cell. So they're placing a cell. So this is for the cell. So limited access, proposed right of way. So they're going to put a cell wherever it sees this feature definition. Alignment, center line, cell. Yeah, I would have to start looking at how they're doing all of this. But let's see, we've got, it's really hard to read, existing water, it's proposed water main, existing water main. So see how it's looking for, it's able to find, this is something we couldn't do previously, is look for these features. So it's able to find point feature definition. So they've got that. So they're looking for B, C, and D water mains. And then we've got some text with a prefix. So I'm wondering if we could set up some sort of text favorite to go and look at some of the additional information that might be on that feature definition and maybe pull that size of that water main out. So that's something I'm going to investigate, but that's something you can try too once you get a little more of a hang of this. So these are all the annotations that are in here. And what I want to do is I'm going to close. And I want to start kind of messing around with this a little bit. Before I do that, I have to go click down into my drawing or into my cross-section view here. So that's why I opened up all three. So it's easy to bounce around. And I want to go to drawing model annotations, remove, and I want to have all. So I'm going to remove all the annotations. Now we're just left with our view here. So that allows me to manipulate some of these things. So what I want to do is kind of merge in my annotations with the annotations that I want to keep here. So I'm going to get rid of, I don't really care about, but I want to keep all of these all of these utility annotations because these are ones that I don't have. Oh, I can't delete them because I'm in this view. So this is another good thing is I have to be in view 1 default to make any changes to these. So you can see how having these windows open is helpful because I couldn't make any changes to the definitions because I wasn't in the default model, but I can't remove the annotation here if I'm not in this view. So it's important to make sure you're in the correct view. Now I should be able to delete those. So I'm just left with the utilities. So I'm going to go in here and manage. And another one of these buttons up here is Export Annotation. I'm going to put that in here. I'm just going to make an annotation folder and then an XS folder, because you're going to end up having different annotations for profile as well. Annotation definitions. I'm going to call this utils. So now I've got those saved. Now I want to import my definition file. And I'll just go find it. Station. So I've got a library set up here where I save all of these. Right there. Annotation definitions, cross section, XS 10.10. That should load all of my annotations on top of the annotations that we had here before. So I have, I've built my own annotation file. I started this project in 10.07, so I had to do a little bit of work to get the cross-section annotation working properly to begin with. FDOT has clearly done a lot of work since 10.07 to get these working a lot better, so that's looking good. But now that we have those annotations here, I could go ahead and export this again. So now I'm exporting the utility definitions plus mine. So I'm going to call this XS Annotation plus utils, because I might not want to bring that definition into my latest cross sections over there, because I've already hand labeled all of my utilities. So I would basically have to go in and delete all of my hand labeling and then have the labels come in. So just be extra work. So now that we have this new definition set up here, we can come back to here and annotate drawing model. Okay. So I want to do all drawing models again. And speaking of, this is one thing that I've kind of implored Bentley to incorporate is, right now we have an all or nothing approach. You can either do all drawing models or just the one that you're in. But what happens if you make a change to, the first 200 feet of this project and you just want to change that annotation? You either have to remove all your annotation or go through each of those sections one by one, remove, add, remove, add, remove, add. What if it's 800 feet? What if it's 1,000 feet? Now we're talking about a lot more jumping between models. So what I'm hoping for is that we can get in a single one, so this drawing model, all, or a station range, which would be really helpful. And that would have to apply to both removing and adding drawing model annotation. So hopefully we can get something like that in the future. I'll go ahead and click through these. Okay, so now we have the mixture of my annotation plus the DOT annotation. So mine's a little bit different. I've gotten comments to do away with the offsets. See, sometimes I still have issues where sidewalks don't come up. So that may be something I have to go back and add to my list of components. Maybe I didn't add this particular one just because we have a barrier wall here, so it's slightly different than this one. But that's something you can do is go ahead and troubleshoot. So you see, okay, I'm missing that one. Let me go back and make sure I get it added and put it in there. So, mine's a little bit different. I've got things in a slightly different spot, but it's all, same information. So I think the last thing I want to cover is, what if let's say I went into my next cross-section file and it loaded this XS annotation, the standard one, but I want to use that XML that I just exported. So in order to do that, we have to come in here. We want to first, I'm clicking in the view 8 here to make sure I do this part. We're going to remove these again. So all drawing models. click back in the default model. I'm going to remove all of these. Okay. And side note, if you are in 10.09 still, there may be a bug where you can't just do what I just did. You would need to come in here, click drawing, and create, or maybe go into cross section, wherever you can create a new folder. New category. Yeah, new category. So that creates a new folder for you. You would drag all of your current definitions into this new folder and delete the folder. That's the only way that you can get rid of them. There's some bug where it thinks it's still in use. So if I hadn't gone ahead and removed my annotations from all of my cross sections before I did this, it would tell me that it's still in use and I can't delete them. But in 10.09 and potentially earlier, there's some bug where even if you have removed them, it thinks they're still in use. So you just have to stick them in this folder and delete the folder. So if I go manage my annotations, you can see I've got nothing in here. So we're good and clean. So usually you would have to go into the new thing, run your cross sections, remove the annotation real quick, delete the definitions, come in here, and then we can import, and I can import that full thing again. Boom. I've got all my definitions back. If I look in here, come on, there we go. Got all my definitions back. And then you can go ahead and run your annotation again. So that's the easy way to do that. I guess another thing you might want to do is, like, maybe you changed one or two of these annotations. You could change the annotation. You could create a new group, and then you could export. You could add just the changed definitions to that group and just export that group so that you're only exporting the things that you changed. So there's ways that you can go about manipulating all of these annotations to get them just the way you like them. But it looks like we're getting more and more options as we go along here, and DOT is doing a good job adding new definitions in here and making sure that we got our cross sections looking good. So I think that's the end of the video. We've covered pretty much everything from creating our sheet to cutting cross sections to looking at annotation. So yeah, thanks for watching.